NFL Week 17 is here. It seems like the season just started, Ron. This is going to be our regular Tuesday version of looking at the NFL. But we have done absolutely zero prep. So this is going to be our conversation with each other, catching each other up on what's going on. Anybody has any questions and they're watching live, feel welcome. Ron is going to have to leave early, so we're going to have an abbreviated show. Ron, what's on your mind this morning? Anything?
Well, happy holidays again. Two things stand out off the playing field in a way. We had a coach fired and we had a quarterback play the second half of a game in full concussion mode. So we could talk about Denver's head coaching situation. Everybody thought they were going to wait till the end of the year, but when you give up 54 points to the LA Rams, maybe it's time to go right now and get an early jump on the coaching search. And Tua throws 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter, and now we may know why. We saw videotape of the vicious hit at the end of the second quarter, and whatever the spotters are supposed to be doing up in the sky box, they didn't do, because he should never have been playing in the second half.
Yeah, I dropped the ball on that. I had somebody send me in DMs a video of that hit and actually suggested that there might be an issue. And I sat there and watched the Miami line go up to, 2.5 in some places yesterday. And I was kind of getting greedy before betting New England. And now it's completely flip-flopped. So very disappointing when you can get a lead on something and you don't act on it. So you have to know that the league is going to take this concussion stuff very seriously. And I should have I just dropped the ball on that. So kind of frustrating.
Yeah. Well, one other interesting scenario, we talked about this briefly on and off air last week, is the fact that now Tennessee and Jacksonville are playing meaningless games this week because nothing matters except for who wins in the final week of the season between Tennessee and Jacksonville. So that line, which I got at Dallas -3 and a little bit at -3.5, is now Dallas -10. I think some of our listeners or watchers also chimed in the chat saying that they had parlayed that particular game with Dallas against Jacksonville. So having Dallas live as their play for Thursday. So congratulations there as well. Anticipating the fact that it's a whole different scenario right now for the Tennessee Titans. What are they playing for? What's going on? Who do they sit? Who don't they sit for this week?
Well, the Titans have nothing to play for, but there's actually a 3% difference on Jacksonville because they can actually qualify as a wild card participant. And I have not caught up on the specific, what actually has to happen that would make them a wild card team, and whether they really need to make any effort at all this week or not, or whether they're basically it's just a remote possibility of needing a bunch of other stuff to happen. I assume you're not caught up on that particular thing either, are you?
I kind of looked at the scenarios before last week's games, and the New England Patriots were in the best position if they could have received that win against Cincinnati. But we talked about it on Friday. We didn't know what their mindset was going to be after that crazy game with Vegas. And they got started too little too late, missed field goals, missed extra points, and they still control their own destiny. If they beat the Dolphins this week, most likely without Tua, and then win their divisional game in the final week, I think they are in the playoffs. So I would give, honestly, the Patriots a little bit better chance than the Dolphins, Jets, or anybody else to make that last wild card spot.
Even finishing against Buffalo.
Yeah, so that's a tough one in a way. What happens if they split those games? Obviously, they have to win this game against Miami, and then it comes down to tiebreakers. And you're right, that's the part I haven't vetted out as much.
Well, if the Steelers can beat Baltimore this week, they're in an interesting position, closing with a so-so Cleveland team.
Yeah, I really was surprised at I took a glance at the lines just before the show, just to be a little bit up. I kind of thought that we may see Lamar Jackson come back this week. That's something to monitor because it will affect line movement in the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game if Jackson comes back. Just the perception that he would be back. Um, Otherwise,
Yeah,
you're looking at
I remember. I think Pro Football Doc or one of the other doctors guys actually commented that he should be back this week, and then the latest thing I've seen indicates that he may not be back this week, which is disappointing because obviously need Baltimore for the divisional futures. What hope we have there, and I think that they'd be a great play this week if Jackson's playing. So uh, I have a vested interest in finding that out.
The one thing about Baltimore Pittsburgh, it's going to be one of those blue collar games where they go in the hot tub after the game because they just play each other so tough. It's a typical 1916, 2017 game. So no matter who's up, who's down in the standings, it just tends to be a close game.
Just taking a quick look at the NFC. Washington's back in that playoff hunt. The Lions really shot themselves in the paw last week. The Bears are going to have absolutely no reason to win this week. They're hoping Houston actually can beat Jacksonville, and they believe the Bears would slide into that number one draft pick, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. The Bears are, as suspected, going nowhere. The Lions were obviously not prepared last week, especially to stop the run. No problems with that. That was very important for me. I think the Packers and Washington will fight it out for the last spot. The Packers somehow put themselves in a position where if they win each of their final two games, it just takes one slip up by Washington. And that's an interesting dynamic too. Does Wentz now get the starting nod?
Yeah, I think they're leaning that direction. The Lions, the Lions control their destiny also. They just need to win their last two games.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
What if Washington wins their last two?
Well, then I'm wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that. But yeah. The Lions and the Packers are obviously next in line right now.
Yeah, I know. I don't see this Jets game is very interesting this week. I don't know why the Jets are favored by 2.5 at this point. You haven't done your work on the NFL, obviously, with your family.
It's probably the most off that I would be on a line to have the Jets favored in that game without doing any further research. I'm definitely surprised at that. Off my power ratings alone, without doing any research, I would have Seattle as a 1.5 to 2 point favorite.
And then, the Rams are showing life. They don't care if they win games or not for draft position because the Lions have their pick. So they're a big monkey wrench this week. San Francisco doesn't want to fall to the 4 seed, I don't think. Let's see.
They won't fall to the 4. There's no chance of that. They have a better chance of getting into the 3 than.
Yeah.
So that won't be a problem. The Chargers could be a small letdown spot now that they clinched the playoffs.
See, I don't think the 49ers really, I think their priority is their health.
Absolutely. That's why we talked about McCaffrey touches last week, which is very important. It would stun me if they wanted to run McCaffrey anything more than 10, 12 times heading into the playoffs.
I think it makes no difference to them if they had to go to Minnesota and play the Vikings for whatever reason. San Francisco is one of those rare teams that can win anywhere. Wouldn't you agree, Ron?
Yeah, they prefer not to be in the elements, but the Vikings are in a dome situation now. So as long as they're in the 2-3 seed, they're okay. You're right. What's most important for them, they're certainly going to try to win and give Purdy as much confidence as possible, but they're also going to play it careful with their starters, maybe a little bit of load management without actually saying it.
So the Cowboys are all but expected to win, since Tennessee has absolutely zero reason to play, and Henry might be sitting out anyway. But the Cowboys, they need the Eagles to lose both games, and the Cowboys have to win both games, and that's a lot of extra effort and a lot of. I don't know that they're going to be, up for the task, so to speak, and be the most motivated team against Tennessee either. So that Thursday game is actually more interesting than I think some people think it is, because I'm not so sure Dallas is going to really show up in full force. I think they're going to want to just try to get out of there with a win any way they can.
I think they are going to try, especially early on. I think they want to put the pedal to the metal right away. I think they're looking at the last week of the season as their rest week. If Philly does win on Sunday, they know they could rest starters next Sunday as well. So this game has to be treated seriously. You can't just turn on and off a switch in the NFL.
Well, that's true. So what do you think Jacksonville does? You think they shut it off this week and give these guys some rest? Because after this week, you've got the Tennessee and then the playoff run.
Yeah, if I were a reporter, I would ask them exactly what their game plan would be if they were up 10 points heading into the fourth quarter. Because if I'm the coach of Jacksonville, I'm trying as hard as possible in the first half. And then the second half, anybody, hurts a fingernail, they're sitting for the second half of the game. But I think they're going to not go into the game thinking they're going to rest anybody. But in the second half, if anybody's banged up, I think that's when you start to see players just sit a little. It's the kind of scenario that we look at each and every year in week 18. First half plays, first quarter plays, second half plays, because of all the permutations as to who's playing in the playoffs the next week, who might be playing on short rest in the playoffs the next week, who's going on the road the next week. In this case, we're talking about getting ready for the week 18 game, the key game between Jacksonville and Tennessee. I think no one rests unless they get banged up in the second half.
Okay.
That's my early take.
I want to discuss some hedging that I did on the Monday night game, but do you have any other thoughts about what did happen last week coming into this week that we haven't touched on?
I'm looking at the schedule. In retrospect, it looks like Deshaun Watson was a little bit more rusty than most people thought. 10 points at home against New Orleans. I don't have any major thoughts. I will say this in terms of hedging. Remember what we said about the Pittsburgh-Vegas game? We had a couple of questions in the chat about the Pittsburgh-Vegas game. I explained why I got off my Vegas +3 and went back to Pittsburgh -2.
Yeah.
Obviously, that turned out to be fantastic, the way it wound up in terms of Vegas losing by 3. And I go ahead and get a Pittsburgh -2 ticket that's almost exactly the same as my Vegas 3 tickets. So you have to be aware of the circumstances going in. So I really think no surprises to me. No surprise to me that Baltimore, even at the end of the game, it wasn't a sure thing, because there's still something a little bit wrong with Baltimore, especially protecting leads. But that's all I have for last week.
I don't know. They got a little distance last week, which was nice to see, and they're a little bit healthier, other than Jackson.
Not putting enough points on the board.
How do you think that they? I mean, are they division? Are they really? Do they need that division title? Do you think?
It wouldn't hurt playing a home game for them. The better situations they're in, if they lose and they end up the 5th seed, they would go
Jacksonville.
They would go to Jacksonville.
Wow.
Yeah. No. Once Baltimore gets in the playoffs, I think you're talking about 50-50 games. There's no sure wins or sure losses for Baltimore. So they're going to have to win, in my opinion, at best 3 50-50 games to get to the Super Bowl. And I don't think that's going to be easy.
So your only bet this week so far is Dallas, right?
That's it. That was a long time ago, as discussed. That when I looked at the line and we talked about this, how to incentivize plays, when they changed the line on Tennessee with Malik Willis starting last week, books were slow to adjust for the look ahead lines, and 3.5 was just you had to do it, and that was the way to go.
I do want to mention, there will be some unpredictable line movements coming forward. These last 2 weeks, you always see, or at least this week more than next week probably, but this is the week where you see some really goofy lines as information comes out. It's sort of like the bowls with opt-ins and opt-outs. People come up, figure out these weird playoff scenarios. Oh no, Buffalo scored. The whole world was on Georgia Southern.
Good for them.
But be aware of that. Make sure you have all your ducks in a row before taking positions on games, because there can be some strong line movements on a fair amount of these games. I mean, and games that have the potential to move a lot are games like potentially the Eagles game, the Jacksonville line, the Patriots line, the Seahawks line, San Francisco line, if they decide to sit people. I mean, they should just – would you sit Purdy, or you keep them in there?
Keep them in there. I think it may or may not mean something to be the second seed, but you're guaranteed 2 home games if you're the second seed, and San Francisco is still in the running, even as high as the second seed.
But I think that's going to be – pardon?
Week 18 is, 1/3 of my handicapping is based strictly on power ratings. And week 18 is the hardest week to use power ratings because of all the scenarios that you mentioned. You're going to have lines that are 7 to 10 points off power ratings, and you have to really invest some time to figure out why.
You know what? Let me just go off topic just for a couple of minutes and touch on the NCAA before we get back to the NFL. Did you do anything else in the games this afternoon? I think the Wisconsin game we liked, but it's kind of getting out of range now at 4.5.
Yeah. Wisconsin, I have a long time ago.
Right.
At -3, I tweeted that out, that I added that to my portfolio. Well, I didn't tweet it out. Sorry. I texted it to you that I added it to my portfolio. Yesterday, you have to wait for late information. I was waiting to see if a quarterback was playing for New Mexico State. The drop off from first string to second string quarterback was enormous. The first string quarterback was cleared to go. So that was a go for New Mexico State. The Buffalo line got too high today, +6. That was a go. The other games, I don't think I have anything in. I sent you some information. I don't believe I'm in on any of the other games today, other than the late game.
And this Duke line is up to 3.5. It opened to 2.5 Central Florida. That's a big move there, Ron.
Yeah, it's a lean for me on Duke, but I don't think they have a shutdown defense. I don't like teams that, unless they're going to get in bona fide shootouts like a Washington-Texas game, I don't think it's worth it for that particular game.
Anything Kansas-Arkansas?
I'm rooting for Kansas mainly because I like the program's trajectory. I think they have to do a little bit more defensively to prove their worth. Arkansas's running back Sanders, if he plays, he's a candidate for at least 150 yards in this game. And that's the factor that would probably mean enjoy the game, no play.
Those last 2 games, North Carolina, Oregon, Mississippi, Texas Tech, seem like coin flips to me.
I have to do more work on it. There's way too many opt-outs in the North Carolina-Oregon game to get excited until game time. You have to digest all the information right before that particular game. Texas Tech is interesting. I can't recall off the top of my head exactly what I wrote about that particular game, but I haven't done anything with either of those games yet. I don't want to ignore a question that's in the chat. So, Russell, I will talk about incentive-based prop bets. We could do that now or a little later. I don't want to disrupt your flow, Chris.
Oh, just one last thing. Minnesota's fully healthy. They get their stud running back back for the bowl game. Any thoughts on that?
Minnesota, well, the line is ridiculous. It's way up there. It's double digits. So if you wanted to do Minnesota, you had to do it at 7. Minnesota has a true shutdown defense, and Syracuse will be without its running back. So it's really all in the hands of the quarterback of Syracuse to make this a game. I just don't like dealing with double-digit spreads. If I like the favorite in a bowl game, that's one kind of ploy that is used is if your underdog has any sort of opportunity or chance in a bowl game, put a quarter of a play on moneyline dogs, because moneyline dogs, which are red hot lately,
huge,
is a winning proposition all the way through, but not including January 1st games this year, January 2nd, but games at the start of the bowl game all the way till December 31st. Moneyline dogs generally win each and every bowl season.
Do you watch for incentive-based prop bets these last 2 weeks in NFL?
Well, Russell and everybody, I actually put out an article every single week 18. I put out an article for personal reasons where my season-long prop bets are and what I need and what I don't need. And I also look to see how many receivers are within shouting distance of 1,000 yards on the season. How many people that need double-digit sacks? If somebody has 9 sacks, do they get to 10 sacks? How many quarterbacks have a chance to reach 3,000 yards or 4,000 yards? Who's in the running for the most receiving yards or the most catches or the most rushing yards? And I think that is an incentive. And you have to get those prop bets fairly early in week 18, because there will be line movement immediately, even on prop numbers. There'll be tremendous line movement in the last week of the season. But yes, I've already charted that out by Tuesday before the lines come out for the props, because you have to be one step ahead of that to know what the quarterback rotation, running back rotation, wide receiver rotation. And that's especially true for teams that are out of the playoffs, because that's their only incentive.
Yeah, and it's even more crucial to be prepared ahead of time and to have and be ready to fire and have your expectations, because this is becoming a crowded market of focus for a lot of people. It's not like you're splitting the atom and letting people know that that these are the things to look for. There's a lot of other people that know about the same stuff. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I would say that you can get reverse value as well for teams that are fighting for the playoffs. Let's say there was a player on New England that needed a few yards to get to 60 yards to get to 1,000 yards rushing or something like that, but New England needs to win the game against Buffalo. That player might be inflated in the prop market, but he's not going to get his total if he's inflated too much, because Bill Belichick's not going to care whether the guy gets 1,000 yards. He wants the team to get in the playoffs. Washington would be the same way. Any team that still has a playoff chance, if those player props get inflated, you actually could find value the opposite direction. So you have to, it's not just about what players are close, but what the scenario is regarding the game management.
I've had people ask about my trailing last 5 weeks, which is something that I compile quickly. I'm trying to see if I see any surprises. I don't see any surprises here to quiz you on this week, so I'll just pop them on the screen here, and we'll see if you have any comments to make. I forget how to blow it up, so but we've got the Chargers, Jacksonville, and Green Bay, San Francisco, and Cleveland up at that top.
How did Cleveland make it up high?
I don't know. Probably.
Chargers for sure. Chargers have been under the radar.
Well, there was a nice win. I laid the 4 in one of those rare games where I don't get the best number, and obviously it closed at as low as 3 minus 120 in some places. So I actually added on an extra unit of play when the market moved against me because I felt pretty confident in the Chargers. They although they didn't play as well as I expected them to do, they have been playing much, much better. Same as Green Bay.
Yeah, nothing else to add on that. I would probably disagree with Cleveland. I think it's dysfunctional right now. They're playing a little bit better and tightening up the defense a little bit, but Watson is going through some rough stretches.
He looked abysmal. I did get to see the last couple of series, and Watson looked abysmal. And I don't know whether it was the cold weather. I doubt it. I think he's looked pretty bad, other than he had a decent second half the game before, I think, and that was about it. But that's scary. And what's really scary is that Washington line is under 3 this week against Cleveland. And it's actually taking Cleveland money. I don't know whether you're aware of that.
No, I hadn't looked at that, obviously.
It was a strong 2.5. It's down to 1.5, 2. One of the handicappers from our summer series released the Browns earlier this morning, moving that line down.
Oh, okay.
So Cleveland, does have a reason to be played technically.
Yeah. Okay. Tim asked a question about the Carolina, whether they get over 6.5. It was a very exciting situation for me that they got that 6th win because it gave me the alternate win total of 5 and over 5.5. I was one of those lone people who liked Carolina at the beginning of the year. And then when they fired their coach, I practically gave up on the play. And I took out a ticket, a 1/4 ticket on under 6.5. So I may be doing some more manipulation because I'd like Carolina to lose their last 2 games. So we'll see what goes on there. But first of all, got the Carolina over 5 and over 5.5. So I'm very excited about that. But Carolina has a fighting chance because until Tom Brady gets going, there's always a chance that they could upset Tampa Bay. It seems like the more you get Tom Brady in rhythm as he continues to throw his 20th, 30th pass, then you can't beat him anymore. They got down 10 last week. And then all of a sudden he's in rhythm.
Yeah, but he's not the same guy anymore. And they've tried to do that rhythm out of the gate in the first period or first quarter, and it just doesn't work. And I think he's more successful just because in later in the games the defenses are a little bit tired and they play differently than what they're going to line up and give him in the early part of the game. So. And he just doesn't have the same skill set and players to assist to really be sharp enough to take advantage of that early in the game if they're prepared for it, so to speak. If later on when they're tired and they're letting it a little looser, he's having more success. I don't think they looked abysmal, absolutely horrible. And then I tweeted out a photo. Almost the entire Arizona offense was in red on the 6 score of injuries. There was only 2 out of the 11 positions that were not red, meaning severe injury. Either somebody's there's backups in, starters out, that sort of thing, and they were still only able to muster that many points.
Yeah, it wasn't very good. I know it's not one of our Friday games with Ted and Sports USA, but I think it's worthy of talking a little bit more Tampa, Carolina in a few days.
Yeah, for me, I guess you and I see things differently. I'm not a big believer in the QB situation with Carolina by any means, but you cannot make more out of what they did with the Lions than what's there. Usually you see a big retraction after a big game like that. But I think Carolina is. I think that game at a 3 is too high, and
Yeah.
I think the
Well,
value is definitely Carolina.
the biggest difference with Carolina now than Carolina last year, the beginning of this year, and so on, is that Darnold has not thrown an interception in his last 3 games, I believe. I could stand corrected. Maybe he's thrown one, but I believe what they've done is said, if you do not throw any interceptions, we're in every single game because we have a decent enough defense. We have a very good running game, and we can hit some throws when we need to. And that's the way Carolina is playing. If they ask Darnold to do too much, -2 turnover ratio, you give up 7 points, you're done. You're out of the game. They can't come back. So they're really taking the ball out of his hands.
I want to make a comment because I get questions on alternate betting because I spend a lot of time on alternate lines and just looking at them. And most of the time, there's not value in the alternate lines, but but you can find value somewhere, someplace, if that makes any sense. There's usually value someplace on the alternate lines, even though most of the offerings, are really bad value or poor value, frankly. But I want to discuss. I had Tampa Bay pick 'em to close out parlays or teasers, and I smelled a rat in that game, and I wanted to figure out, well, how am I going to hedge this? And I felt like I found the perfect way to hedge that game because, what are you supposed to do? You don't want to lay necessarily the Arizona money line, and you could have gotten plus 310 and such, but then you're giving away, you're giving away something. You can't win both bets. And I hate, number one, a hedge or a protection should usually only be in itself a positive EV bet by itself. So I don't like to zero out by buying back at the same price. I think that that's just a waste. I will search high and low to find an alternative. So what I finally came up with was I took Arizona plus 3.5 plus 190. So at least I had the 3 points to work with. And sure enough, it landed on the 3. So that's a way that you can use the alternate lines to your benefit. But what I want to point out is I found a plus 190 at Westgate. It was -1. It was plus 190. It was plus 160, plus 165 elsewhere. That's a huge difference. So you have to shop these alternate lines because there can be those huge differences.
This is a topic probably for another day for more time, but alternate lines, when you're betting in game, you can find some absolute value alternate lines in game. I didn't realize that until this year when I was experimenting with in-game betting. And you can get some really good deals. Your team goes down 7-0, and all of a sudden you could fool around with the lines and you can get plus 150, plus 180, plus 200, whatever. It's just the opening drive of the game and the other team has scored and nothing has happened yet. And if you still like the play, all of a sudden you could risk less to make more because you could get an alternate line at the price that would have been available at the beginning of the game. So that's a whole new topic. In some cases, that's a little bit advanced. Even I'm just testing it out for the first time, but I found some value in that area.
Yeah, you just have to be careful because the algorithms will always lean kind of against you. They're going to know what you're trying to do. Like as they know that you're always trying to go for those middles. You're always, the average person isn't going to go with what has just happened, if that makes any sense. So when a team scores a touchdown, it's not going to credit 7 points the other way, obviously. Right. And oftentimes, maybe it won't even move the line by a full field goal in that direction. And you're getting just robbed. You see that a lot with basketball also, where an underdog of like 8, is winning outright by like 7, and they're still an underdog by 3 or 4 points somehow. So And it's the same way with football. I don't know the exact numbers to use, but just something to consider. As far as teasers this week, I think Seattle's a good teaser this week. You have did you find anything that looked good to you?
I'm really proud of myself for not doing teases. The only thing I would look at are money line parlays. Hop on a team that I really like. Last week was Carolina, and try to match up some money line parlays with them. Didn't trust Baltimore, so I took Baltimore as the money line parlay. Didn't trust a couple of other teams. That kind of works out for me, but I'm out of the teaser business.
And I will say that teasers have been saving my butt this year. And thank goodness I switched to my new betting strategy of layered teasers with staggered start times. Because if I hadn't been doing that, I'd be getting buried this year. I've been on the wrong side of so many games, and I've just missed versus the real point spread in the teaser. I flipped now. I'm in double digits just in the past 5 weeks or 6 weeks. I flipped 10 losers into winners with that teaser strategy we've discussed in previous videos. So don't be afraid of them. You just have to know how to use them. And the one thing I want to say is I don't like stagnant teasers in general. I mean, sometimes you don't have a choice. Next week in particular is going to be that situation because of start times. But using them as where they start at different times can be extremely powerful.
Well, okay, Chris, I think I'll save everything else I have for Friday. Just have one game between now and Friday in the NFL, and I don't need to do anything else on that. So I'm covered, which is great. So when what is Friday is the 30th. So we're still in 2022.
Yep.
So, and I know just to mention Ted's games he gave me his games, Miami and New England, which we may know a little bit more about the Tua situation and the playoff implications. So that might be interesting to talk about. Hopefully Ted's guest won't be Tua, because that would be a little weird to have Tua as a guest, and he might be in concussion protocol. But and the night game is, or the afternoon game that he has that he'll be talking about on Sports USA Live is the Minnesota Green Bay game. And he has put in a request for Aaron Rodgers. He probably has a 10% chance to get it. But wouldn't that be a coup if we could hear from Aaron Rodgers on Friday?
That would be. So, okay, well, we had an abbreviated show. We're both you're going back to family, and I've got NFL to bet. The line's lighting up. Appreciate everybody for joining. There's no more questions that are unanswered. And we're going to be back on Friday, probably around 11 again, hopefully Pacific time.
Okay. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks.